Hi, I'm the Brewmaster. Welcome to the Blind Eternities Tavern. You know, here we play casual magic. We're not constrained by the rules of the constructed formats, their banned and restricted list, their etiquettes of play. And yet, there is a perception that casual magic is weaker than constructed magic, when I believe it should be the reverse. See, in casual magic, you're not shackled to those same set of requirements. You can play with the cards you can't play anywhere else. Today, I want to talk about playing banned cards in casual magic. So pull up a chair, have a seat at the table, and whether you're a button mash hack and slash controller bash, or a meeple moving mastermind of maps, mats, and minis, if you ruffle at the awful riffle shuffle scuffle, or if you're a click clack pick attack number ball luck sack, we're all here for the same reason. I'm Jake. Let's talk games. So before we start talking about the main topic today, I want to tell a little story. Shortly after Future Sight came out, I was still in college, and the girl that I was dating, I had just taught to play Magic, and she was getting a little into it, and we were having a lot of fun trying out new things. And she asked if we could go and get some more cards, buy some booster packs. And you know, hey, a date night's a date night. That sounds great. So we went out, we bought a couple packs of Future Sight, and we were going to just kind of duel them against each other using a version of pack battles. I know there's a few different ways to do it, but essentially the way that I like to do it is you take out the token card and the land card, you add 2 lands of each type, you keep all the cards face down, shuffle up, and just play. It's usually enough to play if you hit anything that's like Phyrexian Obliterator, just anything over 2 of the same type becomes generic mana, and you're good to go. It's a lot of fun. There's huge variance, and sometimes you have a pack that just destroys everybody else, but it's a lot of fun. And the pack that she opened as we went through it afterwards had a particular card in it. It was unique. One of the things they did in Future Sight was release mechanics that wouldn't see play for years down the line, as sort of a glimpse into the future design space of Magic the Gathering. Her first rare that she ever pulled from a pack of Magic the Gathering cards was Steamflogger Boss. Now, if you don't know what this card does, and I don't blame you, it gives all other rigor creatures you control +1/+0 and haste, which is pretty good. So it's a mini lord, it's 4 mana for a 3/3, cool. And then its second effect is if a rigor you control would assemble a contraption, it assembles 2 contraptions instead. Now, even seasoned players of Magic the Gathering might not know what that means, and I don't blame you in that respect either. See, contraptions are cards that look like this. So just as an aside from a gameplay perspective, I haven't seen these cards in a long time, but I was looking at some of these old contraption cards, and something that's really unique about them is that they don't explain how contraptions work on the front of the card. It just says, as an example, Headbanger. Whenever you crank Headbanger, target creature must be blocked this turn if able. It feels like a weird mismatch of Magic in some other card game with other ability words that we don't understand. But then on the back of the card, it explains how to use contraptions, how it cranks, what sprockets are, how you assemble these contraptions and where to put them and what they do. And I think that's really clean game design, and I'd almost like to see that more on creature tokens and other tokens of that sort in Magic, where it has the rules of the game itself, the mechanics of how those things work on the back of the card with the token itself on the front of the card. It's just a really clean design, and obviously it cuts down on the advertising space that they like to put in booster packs, but I really like the way that they put these together. And it seems to be an early foray into the artifact token generation style of gameplay, where you have a separate component deck that you put into play using rigors. But this card wouldn't see another printing for almost a decade. And when it did come back, it came back in an unset. So if you want to know what a rigor looks like, they look like this. They all have a silver border. And they assemble those contraptions that I showed. Obviously, this is a bad first experience for a player, but I think it gets worse if you are holding on to your Steamflogger Boss, waiting for that mechanic to show up. And when it finally does, it's in a silver bordered set, and you still can't use it. And it still stays sitting in your binder to this day. Just describing my own situation here. And even if you were to use it and build a rigger deck with really interesting contraptions, because some of these are very cool, you're playing an illegal deck. You're playing a deck with banned cards that can't be used in any format, can't even be used in casual play, technically. And I think that kind of just feels bad, and it's adding insult to injury. But I don't think that should be the case, and I think we should be free to play our weird contraption-based decks. And as much as I'm against having excess components outside of the game, the casual table is the right venue for that. The casual table is where you should explore ways of building decks that use mechanics and cards that you can't use anywhere else. But to delve a little bit deeper into that, I think there's a lot of cards that are printed in silver bordered sets, cards that are banned that shouldn't be, don't need to be. A good example of this would be something like the Earl of Squirrel. It's 6 mana for a 4/4, not a legendary, so no concern with commander here. It has Squirrel Link, but let's ignore the keywordification of this ability first, and just read the ability itself. Damage dealt by this creature also causes you to create that many 1/1 green squirrel tokens. So this effect, you could write it as a triggered ability. Whenever Earl of Squirrel deals damage, create that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Secondly, creature tokens you control are squirrels in addition to their other creature types. That's nothing new. Magic cards have done that before. And finally, other squirrels you control get +1/+1. All of these abilities function on real Magic cards and exist on real Magic cards. There's no real reason for this to be banned. No reason you can't play this in any regular deck. To stretch it a little further, I think we can take a look at Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. Right, it's your typical sword format. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from a couple of things, in this case, rogues and clerics. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you roll a d20. Now that didn't exist when this card was first made. You didn't roll dice in Magic in any core set, but with the advent of Baldur's Gate, we see a lot more of that. And after you roll that d20, you put a 4/4 flying gold dragon creature token into play, and if you roll a 20 on the dice, do it again. So theoretically, if you roll a bunch of d20s and get 20, 20, 20, 20 in a row, you get a bunch of 4/4 dragon tokens. Most of the time, you can ignore that. It's nice because it lets you roll dice, and if you have cards that care about rolling dice, well, this will trigger them. The only issue on this card, within the regular mechanics of Magic, is that gold is not a color. But if this becomes any other color, red and green, colorless, the card functions just fine. And I actually think it's interesting to have a mechanic that creates a permanent in a color that doesn't exist in Magic. Because it's not colorless, it has a color, but it's not one of the regular colors, so things that care about specific colors don't affect it. So it's not a colorless creature, but it gets around all protection. There's some interesting mechanics that I think come out of this, and this card, I don't think is a problem. I think this works. The protection is nice, but rarely relevant, and a 4/4 on combat damage trigger is nothing new. We see that a lot, and the fact that it's tied to combat trigger means it's actually worse than a lot of things that put 4/4 flying angels into play whenever that creature attacks. My point is that a lot of these weird silver-bordered cards don't break the game, can easily be included, and when we're playing in a casual setting, we can use that to build some kind of interesting decks that do some kind of unique things that we don't normally see. So if we are going to play with banned cards in our deck, if we are going to show up to a table and we have permission from everybody else to use some of those silver-bordered cards, what guardrails should we put in place to make the deck still feel like Magic? I could go either way on those added components, the contraptions or attractions, or a lot of the other things that they now force you to deal with Frankly, keeping track of day and night, city's blessing, and monarch within a regular game of Magic is hard enough, but that sets a precedent, and having more things that you have to keep track of over the course of the game, I think is interesting, and having a deck centered around that does lend an amount of focus to it, where you can keep track of it a little bit easier. But aside from that, I think there's a lot of things that unsets do and other promotional type material do that shouldn't generally be played. Anything that makes you wear stuff on your head or keep track of, your clothing or what you say or dexterity things. One of the cards that I came across going through this is a card called Hot Fix. And as much as I love this card, I don't think it's reasonable to play. Basically, it allows you to search your deck for 10 seconds, sort it however you want, and at the end of the 10 seconds, if you're still touching anything, you have to shuffle. So you have 10 seconds to rearrange a few things in your deck, and then you're done. And that's a cool card generally, but it requires a level of dexterity and a level of manual control of your cards that I think is just a little outside the scope of how Magic should generally be played as a fairly accessible game. But stepping into things that we can include, there's a lot of mechanics that have been brought to Magic that add additional components, dice being one of them, like we talked about a minute ago, that I think a lot of the things from Unstable that reference dice can be included. I think as luck would have it, might be a little bit busted rolling d20s. Basically, at any given time, if you have rolled dice up to 100 pips across all of the dice that you've rolled, you win the game. It doesn't trigger on the upkeep, it just triggers every time you roll a dice. And so this might be a little busted at 1 mana, but I don't think it's going to win any faster than any of the other turn 3, turn 4 combo decks that exist. Krark's Other Thumb literally has printings that were in Standard that allow you to roll dice multiple times. Chittering Doom is a 4 mana cost enchantment that puts a squirrel token into play every time you roll a 4 or higher. Again, the assumption here was that everything was d6s, but now rolling higher dice. I don't think that's even broken if you're rolling d8s, d10s, d20s. Putting 1/1 squirrels into play every time they roll high, I think is fine. Low Blobber rolls a d6, and if you roll a 5 or higher, you untap it. So you can do that multiple times, and it kind of creates a 1-card combo. I've never seen it go higher than 2 or 3 times rolled successfully, even with Krark's Thumb in play, so I don't think it's super broken, but it is kind of a card to watch in that respect. And finally, Mad Science Fair Project is a card that I just want to see printed in black border. It's 3 mana for an artifact. Tap it, roll a dice. If you roll low, it produces colorless. If you roll high, it produces any color you want. I think it's worse than Commander Sphere, frankly. But none of these cards are game-breaking. And none of these cards require you to do things outside the game of Magic. Unhinged had some mechanics based on letters and flavor text and other things that interact with cards in weird ways that I think might fall outside the scope of regular Magic. But I think in these 2 recent unsets, both Unsanctioned and Unfinity, there are a lot of cards that can be used in other formats, and despite their bannings in Legacy and Vintage, I think the sticker stuff and the attraction stuff is fine in casual Magic. On top of some of these unsets, we see other cards released in Silver Border. Most recently, the My Little Pony cards that came out have a good mix of cards that can be played in casual Magic and cards that definitely shouldn't be. Most notably, I think Discord is just a really out there concept that allows you to draw random cards from throughout Magic's history. And I think that playing Momir Vig on the tabletop is just not something that you should really try to do, even though I've seen a few pretty clever ways of getting cards printed on demand. But with that in mind, I think that we can build a deck that uses the mechanics of Magic. Again, like we were saying with Earl of Squirrel, a lot of these old cards that are banned do actually follow the mechanics of Magic. And so there's nothing stopping us from including them. But I think we can go beyond just silver-bordered cards and talk about actually banned cards, especially if we are looking at Commander. Stepping into Commander, the ban list is extensive. and it has a variety of different things that it keeps track of at any given time. There used to be a section of the ban list called Banned as Commander, and I think that that is helpful but confusing. I think there's a lot of cards that are too good to be in the command zone, but maybe not broken if they're in the 99. There are cards I think that should be banned from both, but that should be something that you make a decision as a table. I don't know that that necessarily needs to be part of the Rule Zero conversation every time, but I think there are a lot of cards that can straddle that line of being slightly too powerful as a commander, but maybe fine if included in the rest of the deck. And so I'm of the opinion that most of the cards on the ban list in Commander can be flexible based on the deck that you're playing. Okay, so I want to walk through one of my decks that uses banned cards, or more specifically, card. This is a Commander deck, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I just want to give a brief overview of what the deck does, and I'll do a more detailed breakdown in another video at some point because I'm really proud of this deck, and I really like the way that all the pieces come together. But the Commander is Rarity from the first My Little Pony fundraiser thing that they did. And functionally, Rarity is a discount on all cards in your deck that are rare or mythic. And one of the benefits of Secret Lair is there's been a whole lot of cards that have been printed at rare just because of the way that they handle promo cards. But in addition to that, Rarity has the ability to pay 1 mana and tap her to give another target creature you control protection from the colors of a My Little Pony toy that you show to your opponent. So I have a particular My Little Pony toy. It is a Discord keychain that has all 5 colors of Magic on the toy itself. People sometimes fight me on the specific colors, but even then, I don't think it's particularly broken, and we're mostly using that first ability most of the time. If somebody doesn't want to play with Rarity, the other alternative commander that I usually offer is Grand Arbiter Augustin IV, and they usually go with Rarity, just because Grand Arbiter Augustin IV is functionally the same, but also taxes your opponent 1 on every single spell that they cast. They are a chore to play against, so be careful if you're running this card. People will hate you. But I gotta say, I don't get too much flack for this deck, even though it is built very similarly to a lot of those Grand Arbiter Augustin decks, just because it doesn't have the taxing element. A sort of backup for the commander is a Helm of Awakening. I actually had to trade an original printing of Helm of Awakening for a rare printing of Helm of Awakening, just to fit with the deck. But that's kind of where we're at, trying to make every single card in the entire deck rare, and then we are discounting all of our spells. We have a couple combos in here that rely on that discount. The most obvious is probably using Sensei's Divining Top with the Reality Chip, and because my commander gives the discount, the Reality Chip always has something to equip it to, and with Sensei's Divining Top, which is now free, I can tap Sensei's Divining Top to draw a card, put the top on top of the library, and then cast it from the top of the library for free. So we continue to tap the top. Eventually we draw into a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, draw the rest of our deck, and win the game. Obviously that's one combo in a litany of other things that have various backup pieces, ways to search for the top, ways to search for the chip, other ways to cast things off the top of our deck, and a couple of other combos for good measure. One of my favorites revolves around Enchanted Evening, which makes every permanent in play an enchantment, and then using Aura Thief to steal all enchantments. So I gain control of everybody's permanents. Gets around protection, gets around indestructible, gets around a whole bunch of different things, and usually allows me to win the game in pretty short order. Another combo that I'm running with Enchanted Evening is some flavor of Archon of Sun's Grace, which is whenever an enchantment comes into play, you make a 2/2 token, and since Enchanted Evening makes everything an enchantment, you continue to spew 2/2 tokens until you have a way of getting rid of one of these 2 cards. And that usually leaves you with a large enough army that you win the game. I've only been stopped once after that with a well-timed Pyroclasm, but because I'm in blue-white, there's a lot of protection, a lot of counterspells, and other things that I can do in that case. There's a few other combos hidden in here, but functionally that's how the deck works, and I think it's kind of on par with most power level 7, 8, 9 decks that I've come across. I know the rating system for power level is a little bit wonky, and this is probably a little bit above your kind of average decks, but it's a lot of fun to play. It's fairly fragile, and it uses a commander that a lot of people haven't seen before, and I think that's always a plus, that sense of variety. And so including a few of those banned cards make the deck unique. It makes it interesting. And ultimately, one of my goals is to track down an old unhinged card that also makes foil cards cost 1 less, and foil creatures get +1/+1. I have a steadily growing collection of foil cat tokens for the Ajani combo with enchantments to put a bunch of foil cat tokens into play. But that's my plans for the future. That's kind of how this deck works. It's a lot of fun to play, and I hope this encourages you to have a look at some of the cards that typically aren't legal in formats. Maybe take a look at a modern deck and see if there's something that's come out in Commander or something that's come out in one of the other auxiliary Universes Beyond product that you can include to really change the flavor of the deck, make it feel unique, and bring it to a casual table. Because again, remember, casual doesn't necessarily mean weak. It doesn't have to be a toned down version of your competitive decks. If anything, casual tends to be a turned up version of the casual decks. And as long as everyone's on the same page, it's a whole lot of fun. So give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. I'd love to see some of the weird, not legal, banned decks that you've made that do things that you just frankly can't in regular Magic play. It's been really nice talking to you.